My parents said they'd boycott my wedding if I didn't invite my sister, the one who secretly slept with my fiancé for 6 months. I remember the day they said it like it was yesterday. My mother's voice was calm, soft even. Like she was suggesting I pick a different dress, not asking me to forgive the deepest betrayal of my life. And my father? He just sat there, arms crossed, nodding in agreement, as if what happened didn't matter at all. They told me you and Sarah are sisters. Blood is thicker than water. But what they didn't understand was this. Sarah drove a knife straight into my heart, and Ryan, the man I thought I would marry, twisted it a little deeper every single night. So when I told them Sarah wasn't welcome at my wedding, they didn't hesitate. If she's not invited, they said we won't come either. They thought they were giving me an ultimatum. But what they didn't expect was that I had a choice too. And that choice was something they never saw coming. Stick around to the end because I'll tell you exactly how I responded, and why my wedding day without them turned out to be the most free, most joyful day of my entire life. I suppose the beginning of the end didn't happen the day I found those emails, or even the day I threw Ryan out of our apartment. No, if I'm being honest, and I've had to become very honest with myself lately, it started long before. Before Ryan. Before betrayal had a name. It began in a small 2-bedroom house in a sleepy suburb of upstate New York, where the walls were thin, the love was loud, and the rules were unwritten but firmly enforced. One rule in particular seemed to govern our household. Family comes first. And in our family, that almost always meant Sarah comes first. My name is Elise. I'm the eldest daughter of John and Mary, a bookish, quiet soul who learned early that peace in the household often depended on how quickly I could fold myself into the background. 3 years after me came Sarah, loud-spirited, impulsive. She was the kind of child who left a trail of glitter paint and broken rules in her wake, and somehow still was always the favorite. I say that without bitterness now. At least I try to. Sarah was the kind of person people wanted to protect. She had this ability to break things, rules, promises, sometimes hearts, and still be forgiven, still be pulled into someone's arms with a soft. She didn't mean it. Growing up, we shared a bedroom, a closet, and it seemed my identity. I was Sarah's sister, not Elise. Teachers, neighbors, even relatives would light up when they saw her and then glance at me with polite indifference. "Oh, you're the quiet one," they'd say, as if that explained it all. Our parents didn't hide their favoritism. They called it love, of course. They dressed it up in phrases like, "Sarah's just sensitive. You're the strong one. She needs more attention right now. You've always been so independent, Elise. We never worry about you." At 12, I learned what it meant to step aside. That year, our birthdays fell on a weekend, and my parents decided to throw a joint party. 1 cake, 1 guest list, 1 spotlight. But everything about that day screamed Sarah. The decorations were her favorite colors, pink and gold. The music playlist was hers. Even the candles on the cake were shaped like her name. And when she threw a tantrum because her friend didn't show up, I was the one who consoled her on my own birthday. No one noticed I hadn't even gotten to blow out the candles. That night I cried alone in our shared bedroom. And in the bunk above, Sarah slept soundly, her face peaceful and unbothered. It wasn't just birthdays. It was school plays where I played the tree and Sarah got the lead. It was chore charts mysteriously erased on the weeks she was assigned. It was my father giving her his old car at 16 and telling me, "You'll manage," when I had to take the bus to college interviews. There was a moment in high school that I can't seem to forget no matter how hard I try. I had just won a statewide essay competition, something that took weeks of preparation, editing, and nerves. I was invited to read it aloud at the local library. My mom said she'd come. She didn't. Instead, they all went to see Sarah perform in a school musical, an ensemble role, nothing major, but still. She was so excited, Mom told me on the phone, not a hint of apology in her voice. We couldn't let her down, and I stood in front of a room full of strangers and read my heart out. Alone. I'd love to tell you I resented Sarah, that I hated her for soaking up all the light. But the truth is, I loved her. Maybe too much. I saw her pain when she was dumped by her first boyfriend. I picked her up drunk from parties she wasn't supposed to attend. I lent her money, time, and pieces of myself I can never get back. And yet the family praise always echoed, "You're such a good sister, Elise. We don't know what we'd do without you." It never sounded like a compliment. It sounded like a duty. When I left for college, I thought things might change. I was on my own. A scholarship student juggling part-time jobs, studying marketing, finally building something that was mine. Meanwhile, Sarah dropped out of community college within a year and moved back home. My parents didn't blink. "She's still figuring things out," they said. Not everyone finds their path as easily as you did. I found myself paying for my own textbooks while Sarah posted selfies from music festivals she couldn't afford. When she ran out of money and needed a place to crash, she called me. And like always, I said yes, because that's what I'd been trained to do. But something inside me had started to shift. There were cracks forming in the foundation moments where I paused before answering her calls or flinched at the way my parents still guilted me for not coming home more often. For the first time, I started to ask, what about me? Of course, I didn't dare say it aloud. That question hung in the air like smoke, unspoken but heavy. I never imagined the final blow would come from both of them, Sarah and Ryan. But perhaps I should have seen it coming. Perhaps all those years of stepping aside trained everyone around me to believe I would keep doing it no matter how deep the wound. So when my parents said they wouldn't come to my wedding unless I invited the sister who had slept with my fiancé, I wasn't shocked. I was just done. Because I had spent a lifetime stepping back. But I never expected the day would come when they would push me all the way out. After spending most of my life feeling like a supporting character in my own family, college was the first place I ever felt truly seen. It was a fresh start, new city, new people, and for once, no Sarah. No parents to remind me who I was supposed to be. It was in that freedom that I met Ryan. We crossed paths at the university library, cliché I know, but real. I was tucked in a corner reading The Bell Jar, trying to lose myself in someone else's voice, when I heard his calm, steady, and curious. "That's a heavy read for a Tuesday morning," he said, tilting his head to glance at the cover. I looked up expecting another guy trying too hard, but Ryan wasn't like that. He genuinely cared about what I was reading. We ended up talking for nearly an hour about Plath, then Salinger, then poetry, then the fact that he hated social media and preferred real conversations. He had this quiet intelligence that didn't demand attention, it just drew you in. Over time, what started as casual conversations turned into late-night walks, coffee runs, and long meandering talks on park benches about literature, life, and the kinds of futures we each imagined. He listened not just with patience, but with real intent. He made me feel like my words mattered. And after years of being the background character to Sarah's chaos, that mattered more than I could say. By the time I graduated, we were inseparable. He was a year ahead of me and already working for a small publishing house downtown. We made the decision to move in together shortly after, both practical and romantic. Rent was expensive, and we didn't want to spend another day apart. Our apartment wasn't much, just a one-bedroom on the third floor of an aging brick building with creaky floors and a view of the alley, but to me, it was our sanctuary. We filled it with books, mismatched furniture, and routines that became small rituals. Sunday mornings with pancakes and jazz, Tuesday night takeout and old movies, and quiet evenings curled up on the couch reading different books with our feet touching. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's support system. I wasn't the responsible one, the dependable one, or the one making sacrifices. I was just Elise, loved, wanted, and finally, at peace. Of course, peace never lasts, not when Sarah is involved. She started coming around more often once she learned Ryan and I were living together. At first, it made sense. She was between jobs again, couch surfing, and needed a place to crash for a few nights. Ryan didn't seem to mind. "She's your sister," he said with a shrug. "It's just temporary." So we gave her the couch. And then the couch became the floor of our bedroom when her friends kicked her out. Then it became a week. Then 2. And eventually, Sarah was just part of our daily lives. She was always cheerful, always enthusiastic. She'd bring back wine, cook elaborate dinners we didn't ask for, leave messy art projects all over the kitchen table, and talk endlessly about this new creative idea she had, or the big break just around the corner. Ryan laughed at her jokes. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was bubbly and outgoing, charming in the way Sarah had always been. But there were moments, fleeting subtle, where I caught them sharing glances that lingered a second too long, or laughing a little too loudly at inside jokes I wasn't part of. Still, I told myself it was in my head. After all, Sarah was my sister. And Ryan loved me. I had no reason to be suspicious. My parents surprisingly adored Ryan. We visited them for Thanksgiving the first year we moved in together, and my father took an instant liking to him. They talked about old books, classic films, and even politics, without raising their voices, something I didn't think possible in my family. My mother watched us interact and later whispered to me in the kitchen, "You're lucky, Elise. He's grounded, kind. We're proud of you." Proud. That word caught me off guard. It was the first time I'd heard it from her in years. Sarah, of course, was at that same Thanksgiving dinner. She showed up late, wearing a dress too tight for a family gathering and red lipstick that left prints on her wine glass. But everyone smiled. Everyone accepted her. Because that's what always happened. Later that evening, I found her and Ryan talking alone on the porch. She was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm. He pulled back slightly when he saw me almost too quickly. It unsettled me. But I didn't say anything. Because why would I? Sarah was my sister. Ryan was my partner. And I was the one who always made room. Looking back, I wonder if it all started on that porch Thanksgiving night. The air was crisp, the kind that makes your breath visible, and yet something about the way Ryan looked when I opened the door. It wasn't the cold that made me shiver. I told myself not to overthink it. I always overthought things right. That's what Sarah used to say. You've got to stop looking for ghosts. Elise, not everything is a problem to be solved, but ghosts have a funny way of making themselves known. In the weeks that followed, Ryan and Sarah's friendship seemed to bloom into something more familiar. Not romantic, at least not openly, but close. Too close. They developed a rhythm, a kind of shorthand I was suddenly no longer a part of. They had inside jokes, references to shows they watched when I wasn't home, quotes from songs I'd never heard of exchanged like coded messages across the room. Ryan would laugh in a way that was new, lighter, boyish, like someone who'd found an unexpected amusement in life. And Sarah. She basked in it. She'd mimic his gestures, tease him with a flick of her hair, casually bump his shoulder as she passed. It was subtle. If you didn't know either of them, you might have thought they were just friendly. But I knew Ryan. I knew Sarah. And slowly I started to feel like a third wheel in my own apartment. Ryan began staying out later than usual. Work, he said. The project deadline's killing me. Or, my boss asked for a last-minute rewrite. He'd come home tired, distracted sometimes, smelling faintly of cologne he didn't usually wear. I'd ask about his day, and he'd respond in broad strokes, never specific. Never unkind, but never really present either. He stopped making coffee in the morning, stopped bringing me books from the used store. The small things, those quiet rituals we'd built, were falling away like autumn leaves in a storm. One night I asked if everything was okay. Of course, he said, smiling tiredly. I've just got a lot on my plate. It should have reassured me. But it didn't. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed more comfortable than ever. She wore my oversized sweatshirts around the apartment, left her sketchbooks on the couch, and kept her things in our shared bathroom as if she lived there permanently. She was always there, laughing loudly at something Ryan said, sprawled across the couch beside him, even stealing his fries when we ordered in. And Ryan. He never seemed to mind. They started cooking together when I worked late, something that used to be our thing. I'd come home to the smell of garlic and rosemary, their laughter spilling out of the kitchen like it belonged to some other couple. One afternoon I overheard them from the hallway as I unlocked the door. They were in the kitchen. Sarah said something I couldn't quite make out, but Ryan laughed, really laughed, and said, "You're impossible, you know that." Then a softer tone. But I get it. That tone, it wasn't just friendly. It was intimate, familiar, private. I stood there with my hand on the doorknob for a full minute before finally opening it. They went quiet as soon as they saw me. Sarah offered a loud, cheerful, "Hey, Ryan," gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. But their eyes flickered just for a moment like kids caught doing something they shouldn't. I tried to push it out of my mind. I tried to be reasonable. This was my sister. This was the man I loved. They would never... Would they? But the doubt lingered. One Thursday evening, I left work early. My afternoon meeting had been canceled, and I thought I'd surprise Ryan by cooking dinner for once. It had been weeks since we'd shared a proper meal together, and something inside me was aching for normalcy. As I walked up the stairs to our apartment, I heard music playing from inside Sarah's favorite band. I smiled, thinking maybe she'd finally cleaned up after herself. Maybe for once the apartment wouldn't look like a hurricane had passed through. I unlocked the door quietly. No one was in the living room. Then I heard movement down the hallway, Ryan's voice low and muffled, followed by Sarah's laugh. I turned toward the sound just in time to see Sarah stepping out of the bedroom. Our bedroom. She looked surprised to see me, but only for a second. "Oh, hey," she said casually, brushing hair from her face. "Didn't know you were home early." She was wearing one of Ryan's old flannel shirts open over a tank top. Barefoot. No makeup. The air was thick with something I couldn't name but felt in my bones. Behind her, I saw Ryan standing near the bed holding a mug. He looked nervous, startled. "Hey," he said, his voice a little too upbeat. "We were just talking." I nodded, trying to smile. Right. Talking. I walked into the kitchen and set the groceries down without a word. My hands trembled as I opened the refrigerator. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was worse. Confusion. And beneath that fear that something was shifting, something I couldn't quite name but would soon be forced to see. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was projecting my insecurities, that Sarah and Ryan were just close, that families shared space, shared clothes, shared jokes, that trusting the people you love shouldn't be this hard. And so I shoved the doubts down. I buried them beneath busy days, sleepless nights, and the stories I'd always been told Sarah would never hurt me. Ryan was loyal. Family comes first. I wanted to believe those things. I needed to. Because the alternative was too painful to imagine. Not yet. Not then. Doubt is a quiet thing at first. It whispers, taps you on the shoulder when you least expect it. But when it finally screams, it's unmistakable. I didn't go looking for the truth. Not really. I still wanted to believe that the strangeness between Ryan and Sarah was just a side effect of proximity, of messy boundaries and overlapping lives. Families were complicated after all. People get too close. They cross lines. But crossing lines isn't always crossing trust. That's what I told myself. Until the email. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I had an early meeting at work and was rushing out the door with my laptop bag half-zipped and a granola bar between my teeth. I realized halfway to the train that I'd left my flash drive at home, an old habit I hadn't broken despite everything moving to the cloud. Sarah was still staying with us. I figured she'd be home, so I texted her. "Hey, can you check my desk? There should be a black USB drive next to my laptop. Can you email the contents to me?" Her reply was almost immediate. "Sure. Gimme 5. Relieved, I jumped off the train and headed toward a nearby cafe to log in and prep for the meeting. A few minutes later, the email came through. But it wasn't just the file I was expecting. The subject line was odd, sent Ryan. No punctuation, no context, like she was in the middle of typing and hit. Send too fast. At first I thought she'd made a mistake, maybe attached the wrong document. But then I opened it. What I found wasn't a presentation or a folder of work documents. It was a draft, a raw, unfiltered draft of a message that stopped me cold. No greeting. Just a string of thoughts, half sentences, unfinished phrases. But enough to see what it was a message meant for Ryan. I still think about last weekend. Your hands. The way you said my name. I hate lying to her, but it feels so right when we're together. I don't know how much longer we can pretend. I miss you. I stared at the screen, frozen. The world around me, the cafe, the early morning bustle, the low hum of voices faded into static. My fingers trembled. My stomach twisted into something unrecognizable. Was this real? I reread the draft. Again and again. Each time the words made less sense and yet more horrible sense than before. I needed answers, real ones. I called work and said there was a family emergency. I don't even remember what excuse I gave. My mind was already spinning in 100 directions. I rushed home. Sarah wasn't there. Ryan wasn't due back for hours. I had the apartment to myself, and I didn't waste a second. I opened Ryan's laptop. We shared everything: Netflix passwords, phone plans, a shared calendar. He trusted me, and I'd never had a reason to snoop before. Until now. His email was open. Slack messages, calendar invites. But none of it told me what I needed to know. Then I saw it. A small pop-up in the corner, messages synced via iCloud. My heart thudded. I opened the Messages app. The first few were ordinary friends, coworkers. But then I found the thread. Sarah. Hundreds of messages. Flirty, bold, vulgar in a way that made my skin crawl. I can still feel you from last night. I didn't sleep a wink. Wish she wasn't home so we could finish what we started. We're so good together. I don't feel guilty when I'm with you. Isn't that messed up? The timestamp hit me like a punch. 6 months. They'd been doing this for 6 whole months. There were photos, emojis, nicknames, even discussions about me mocking my routines, my habits, the way I always had my nose in work. They had created a second relationship parallel to mine within the walls of my own home. While I cooked dinners, while I made space for Sarah to stay with us, while I slept beside Ryan, they were slipping into something unspeakable right under my nose. And now I couldn't unsee it. I closed the laptop and sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. There were no tears yet. Just a hollow, echoing sound inside my chest, like the quiet after a building collapses. I replayed every interaction, every laugh they shared, every time Sarah wore Ryan's clothes and said it was just comfy every night Ryan came home late and kissed me distractedly. All the pieces clicked together with a brutal finality. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. They had built this lie brick by brick, moment by moment, and I had helped them unknowingly, yes, but helped all the same. I had given Sarah shelter. I had given Ryan my heart. And they had used both against me. The email wasn't just an accident. It was fate. Or maybe it was Sarah getting careless, or wanting to be caught. I didn't know. And at that point I didn't care. Because the truth was undeniable now. They had betrayed me. Together. For 6 months. I didn't cry until much later. Not then. Not in the moment. What I felt first was rage. But the heartbreak. That would come soon enough. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable. When the weight of truth presses so heavily against your chest that you're forced to do something, anything, just to breathe again. That's how I felt as I sat alone in our apartment. Ryan's laptop still open beside me, the screen dimming every few seconds like it too wanted to forget what it had shown me. But I couldn't forget. I wouldn't. Not after what I had read. When I heard his key in the lock later that evening, my heart didn't race. It stilled. Like a calm before a storm, quiet, eerie, absolute. He walked in like nothing was wrong. Hair tousled, jacket slung casually over one arm. He looked at me sitting on the couch and smiled. "Hey, babe. Everything okay?" I didn't speak. I picked up my phone from the coffee table, pulled up the screenshot I'd saved the message from Sarah, The one where she said she missed the way he touched her and held it out. His eyes dropped to the screen. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug on his blood supply. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he finally looked up and asked weakly, Where did you get this?" That was his first response. Not denial, not guilt, just damage control. From the laptop, I said, my voice steady. Too steady. The messages synced. He ran a hand through his hair, already pacing. "Okay, listen. Elise, it's not what it looks like." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Please, Ryan, don't insult me. It's exactly what it looks like." He started to talk fast, disjointed. "It didn't mean anything, I swear. It got out of hand. It was late nights. She was always around. We were talking and I don't know. One thing led to another. I just stared at him." He continued, "It was a mistake. That's all. A horrible mistake. I never stopped loving you. A mistake," I said, finally standing. "You call 6 months of lying and sneaking around a mistake?" His mouth opened and closed like he wanted to argue the length, the timeline, like if he said it was 4 months instead of 6, it would somehow hurt less. "It didn't start like that," he said. "At first we were just talking. She was feeling lost. You were so busy. I was just trying to be kind." "You were trying to be kind," I repeated. "And then your kindness wandered into my sister's bed." That stung him. Good. He sat down heavily on the edge of the coffee table, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. "It wasn't about love," he mumbled. "I didn't fall in love with her." "Then what was it?" I demanded. He looked up, his expression exhausted, hollow. "It was, I don't know, comfort, escape. She made me feel like someone else, like I could breathe without all the pressure. With you, I had expectations. With her, it was just easy." "Easy," I said, blinking. "You think cheating is easy?" "Is that supposed to make me understand I lost control?" he whispered. "The art stuff, the music, it connected us. I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt my knees weaken, but I wouldn't let myself fall. Not in front of him." "No," I said softly. "You didn't mean to get caught." Before he could respond, there was a knock at the door, and somehow before I even opened it, I knew. Sarah. She stood there looking casual jeans sweatshirt, not a trace of shame. Her eyes flicked from me to Ryan behind me, then back to me again. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in, not because I wanted to hear her, but because I needed to. She walked in like she owned the place, like nothing had happened. And that more than anything made me want to scream. She didn't wait for me to ask. "I'm sorry," she said flatly. "But I love him. I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did. And I'm not going to lie about it." There it was. No denial, no pretense. Just a confession dropped on the floor like a used tissue. "You love him," I echoed. She nodded. "And I know what you're going to say. That I broke your trust. That I ruined everything. But I've been second to you my whole life. I finally found something that was mine. Something that was yours," I said. "Sarah. He was my fiancé." "You weren't even engaged yet," she snapped. Ryan winced. I stared at the both of them, my sister and the man I had once pictured building a life with, and felt something inside me fracture. Not crack. Break. Cleanly. Quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned, walked into our bedroom and pulled out a duffel bag. I began to pack, not carefully, not with sadness, just efficiently, like I was evacuating a burning building. Ryan followed me in. "Elise, please. Don't do this. Let's talk about it. We can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said without looking at him. "You don't have to go," he said, voice rising slightly. "I told you she didn't mean anything. Then you won't miss her when she's gone." He had no reply. I zipped the bag, grabbed my keys, and left, walking past Sarah as she stood in the hallway like a ghost that had gotten what it wanted. I didn't go home. I went to Emily's. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, saw my face, and said, "Stay as long as you need." And I did. I collapsed on her couch, numb, silent, and hollowed out by betrayal I had never seen coming, even though now it seemed so obvious. I didn't sleep that night. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sharing my space with liars. I stayed quiet for a few days after leaving. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't yet know how to say it. My mind was still reeling, caught somewhere between grief and fury, disbelief and numbness. I was sleeping on Emily's couch, drinking too much coffee and pretending I was fine every time she asked. But inside, I was unraveling. Eventually, I knew I'd have to tell them my parents. They were going to find out anyway. Better they heard it from me than from Sarah, or worse, from some twisted version of the truth. So on a Sunday afternoon, I called. My mother answered first. Her voice was instantly concerned. "Elise?" "Oh, honey, we've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? Why haven't you called back?" I paused. Even then, a small part of me wanted to protect the people who had never quite protected me. But I pushed through. "I've been dealing with something," I said. "Something big." There was a beat of silence on the other end, and then, what happened? So I told her. Everything. The messages, the affair, the 6 months of deception, Sarah's admission, Ryan's betrayal, my leaving. All of it. I kept my voice calm, factual, because if I let emotion in any emotion, I knew I'd fall apart. The silence that followed stretched on so long I thought the line had dropped. But then she spoke. Softly. Carefully. "Are you sure that question? Are you sure it cracked something in me?" I read the messages, Mom. I said sharper than I meant. I saw everything. I confronted them both. They didn't deny it. Another pause. Oh my God," she whispered. I don't even know what to say." My father must have been nearby because suddenly his voice was on the line too. Stern, booming, confused. "What's going on?" So I said it again. And again I waited. When he finally responded, he sounded more tired than angry. "I can't believe Sarah would do something like that. To you, of all people." I closed my eyes, letting that brief flicker of justice wash over me. But it didn't last long, because what followed was worse than silence. "She's still your sister," my mother said gently. "We'll talk to her. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't a mistake," I interrupted. "It was a choice, over and over again. Elise, I'm not saying it's okay. Of course not. But Sarah, she's always been impulsive. She doesn't think things through." "And what about Ryan?" I snapped. "He was the adult in the room, right? Or do we forgive him too because Sarah needed comfort?" My father exhaled loudly. "Let's not make this more complicated than it is. We're a family. We need to find a way forward." That was it. That was the moment I realized they weren't calling to understand what happened. They were calling to repair it, to smooth it over, to put a Band-Aid on a stab wound and pretend everything could be okay again. "You don't get it," I said, my voice cracking. "She didn't just betray me. You did. Right now. By acting like this is something I should just get past." "We're not taking sides," my mom said quickly. "Yes, you are," I whispered. "You just chose hers." There was a pause, and then that line I'll never forget. "Sarah's fragile Elise. She's been struggling. You've always been the strong one. Maybe you can find it in your heart to forgive her." That sentence hit harder than the betrayal itself, because it confirmed everything I had always known, but never wanted to believe. They only saw me as the one who could endure. So when pain arrived, they handed it to me. When someone needed to be sacrificed, they chose me because they thought I'd survive it. My parents weren't asking me to forgive. They were asking me to carry the weight of Sarah's choices so she wouldn't have to. And they dressed it up in the language of family. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The call ended not with resolution, but with my mother saying, "Please think about it. Don't throw away your relationship over this. We're begging you to consider reconciliation." I hung up. And then I broke. Not because I'd lost Ryan, not because of Sarah, but because the people who were supposed to protect me from the world had handed me over to it instead. That night I sat on Emily's porch wrapped in a blanket staring at the stars through blurred eyes, and I said something I never thought I'd say. I don't think I have a family anymore. Emily didn't argue. She didn't try to fix it. She just put her arm around my shoulder and said, "Then you can have mine." And somehow that one sentence did more to heal me than all the calls, all the apologies, and all the twisted expectations of blood ever had. The days after that phone call were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that presses on your chest like a weight thick with the things left unsaid. I stopped answering my parents' calls. I didn't block them, not yet, but I let every ring go to voicemail. I needed time, space, and more than anything else, I needed them to understand that what they were asking of me wasn't forgiveness. It was surrender. But of course, that wasn't what they heard. Instead, they took my silence as defiance. And when people feel defied, they push back. A week later, an envelope showed up at Emily's apartment. Not a letter, not a card, just a folded sheet of printer paper slipped into a plain envelope with my name written in my mother's neat slanted handwriting. Inside were 5 short lines. "We love you. We want to be there for your big day. But excluding your sister will only deepen this rift. We're asking you to reconsider, or we will not be attending the wedding. Please call us." That was it. No apology, no regret, just a gentle threat wrapped in love's language. I showed it to Emily. She read it twice, then handed it back to me with a sigh. "They really think this is going to work. They think I'll bend like I always have." She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Later that night, I sat on the floor of her living room surrounded by color swatches and wedding to-do lists, and realized that my parents were trying to turn my wedding, the one piece of joy I had left, into a battleground. And they weren't done yet. Because 2 days later came the second blow. I was at the florist finalizing centerpieces when my phone rang again. This time I answered. Maybe a part of me hoped they were calling to apologize. But no. It was my father. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We've been talking," he said. "And your mother and I think perhaps Emily isn't the best person to stand beside you on your big day." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Well," he continued, "it's no secret that Emily's been a wedge between you and the family. We know she's been giving you advice that's only pushing you farther away. Maybe someone from the family should be your maid of honor. It might help rebuild things." I almost laughed, not from humor, but disbelief. "You want me to uninvite the one person who actually supported me through all of this so I can replace her with the person who betrayed me?" "No one's saying replace," he said quickly. "But appearances matter, sweetheart. And maybe Emily's presence is complicating things." There it was. The second ultimatum. Not only did they want Sarah at the wedding, they wanted Emily out of it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. "You know what, Dad?" I said, my voice icy. "You keep saying you're not taking sides, but everything you've said and done proves you already have. You picked her. The one who lied. The one who destroyed my trust, my future. You chose her because it's easier to forgive the storm than to stand with the one left in its wreckage." He tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. "Emily didn't pull me away. You did. When you decided keeping Sarah comfortable was more important than standing beside the daughter who was bleeding." "That's not fair," he said. "No," I whispered. "It's exactly fair." Then I hung up. And this time I didn't wait for the phone to ring again. I sent one text to both of them. If you cannot respect my pain, you have no place in my joy. Do not contact me again about the wedding. When I say I'm done, I mean it. That night I removed them from the guest list. I deleted their mother of the bride and father of the bride placeholders in the seating chart. I called the planner and asked her to reassign their chairs. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat on Emily's couch sipping tea and letting the final piece fall into place. I wasn't walking away from my family. They had already walked away from me. As days passed, I could feel the Cold War truly begin. No more letters. No more calls. Just silence. My extended relatives began to whisper. Some reached out awkwardly, tiptoeing around the topic. But I held the line. If they choose betrayal over boundaries, they choose exile too. And as I updated the RSVP list and finalized the bridesmaid schedule, I looked at the empty space where my parents' names used to be, and for the first time I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Living with Emily was never supposed to be permanent. I had originally planned to stay just a few nights long enough to clear my head, maybe find a temporary rental. But those few nights quietly became weeks. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was breathing again. Emily never made me explain myself. She didn't demand answers or timelines. She gave me space when I needed it, sat with me when I broke down, and reminded me without words that not everyone I loved would choose to leave. Her home became my harbor. Not because it was fancy, it wasn't, but because it was warm, safe, human. Some evenings we'd curl up on the couch with old movies and ice cream. Others she'd coax me into coming to small gatherings with friends, just so I wouldn't forget how to laugh. It was during one of those low-key nights that I met Alex. I wasn't expecting much. Emily had dragged me to a friend's backyard barbecue. I had barely touched my plate, mostly sipping sweet tea and nodding through conversations I wasn't quite present for, until he sat down across from me. There was nothing flashy about Alex, no big gestures or practiced lines. He introduced himself with a warm handshake and a slightly crooked smile, said he was a high school English teacher. We got to talking about literature of all things. For the first time since Ryan, the subject didn't sting. He made a joke about how teenagers thought Hemingway was boring and how he secretly agreed with them. I laughed. Genuinely. So what do you read when you're not assigning term papers? I asked. Poetry mostly, he said. The kind that's too emotional to teach. I remember staring at him for a moment too long, surprised by the honesty. That was the first night I noticed how unfamiliar kindness felt when it wasn't followed by manipulation. I didn't fall for him that night. I didn't even think about dating. Romance was the furthest thing from my mind. But I remember thinking, he's safe, and right now that's enough. We started meeting more often. Sometimes it was just the group hanging out. Sometimes it was Emily conveniently forgetting she invited Alex over for dinner too. He never pried, never asked what happened to me, but I knew he'd heard parts of it through mutual friends. Still, he never treated me like I was broken, just careful. Gentle in a way that didn't make me feel fragile but rather respected. Little by little, the walls I had built so high started to show cracks. Not because he tore them down, but because he waited patiently outside them. I remember one evening, weeks after our first meeting, sitting on Emily's porch swing with him while the cicadas buzzed in the warm air. I told him I didn't know if I could trust anyone again, that I wasn't ready for anything serious. He didn't flinch. Then we won't be serious, he said. We'll just be whatever you need. That was the moment I knew I'd let him in. He wasn't Ryan, and thank God for that. There were no grand romantic promises, no illusions of perfection, just someone willing to sit in silence when words were too heavy. In time, I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, waking up without the ache that had taken up residence in my chest. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped checking my phone, waiting for messages that would never come. My parents never called. Sarah didn't write. Ryan remained a ghost. and I was finally okay with that. Emily watched the shift in me like a proud sister. She never said it aloud, but I could see it in her eyes, the relief, the cautious hope. One night she brought out a bottle of red wine and toasted to beginnings. To new chapters, she said. I raised my glass. And to old ones, we're strong enough to close. For the first time in months, I didn't just feel like a character in someone else's tragedy. I felt like the author of my own next act. Planning a wedding was never on my list of dreams after what had happened. In fact, if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be walking down the aisle with someone who truly loved me, after the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak, I would have laughed and told you you were crazy. But there I was. Alex and I were engaged. The kind of engagement that didn't need to be loud or flashy to be real. We'd been through enough storms to know that love wasn't about the ring or the guest list. It was about choosing each other. Every day. Quietly. Honestly. Everything was coming together beautifully. The venue was a charming old barn with string lights, wooden beams, and open skies. Emily was my maid of honor, of course, and our close circle of friends had rallied around us like family. Because in every way that mattered, they were. The only thing not perfect. My parents. I hadn't spoken to them in over a year. Not since they issued their ultimatum. Either invite Sarah to the wedding or they wouldn't come. They'd kept their word. No calls, no visits. Radio silence. And I had kept mine. I built my life without them. Quietly, painfully, but with resolve. So when I saw the letter in the mailbox, handwritten familiar cursive, I knew exactly who it was from before I even opened it. The envelope was cream-colored, the kind my mother used for birthday cards and thank-you notes. Inside was a folded page with words that shook me more than I expected. "Dear sweetheart," it began, "we miss you. We've given you space because we thought you needed time. But with your wedding coming, we feel it's our chance to make things right again. Sarah has apologized. She's in therapy. She's rebuilding her life. We know she made a mistake, but she's still your sister. We hope you'll consider this a chance not just to heal, but to bring our family back together. If there's room for forgiveness, there's room for us. Please don't shut the door forever." There was no, "we're sorry." No admission of what they had done wrong, only a plea wrapped in emotional pressure and sweetened guilt. A plea to forgive for their comfort, not for my healing. I sat with that letter for hours. I read it again and again. Then I took out a pen and paper and wrote my own letter back. "Dear Mom and Dad, I read your letter. I understand your desire for things to go back to normal. But normal is gone. It died the day you told me that Sarah's betrayal was something I should overlook for the sake of family. You've asked me to forgive without an apology. To invite someone who hurt me to the most sacred day of my life, not because it's right, but because it's easier for you. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, safety. And you failed to give me any of those when I needed them most. I won't invite Sarah to the wedding. And I won't invite you either, not because I hate you, but because I finally love myself enough to stop letting guilt dictate my boundaries. My wedding is a celebration of love, not a reunion of unresolved pain. I wish you peace, but you will not be there." I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and dropped it in the mailbox without flinching. That night, I cried not from regret, but from release. There's a strange kind of grief that comes when you realize your family will never be what you needed. And an even stranger kind of strength when you accept that and build something better anyway. Alex never pressured me about the guest list. He let me take the lead. And when I told him that I wasn't inviting my parents or Sarah, he didn't ask why, he simply said, "Good. You deserve peace on your wedding day." The weeks passed and the RSVPs came in. My parents never responded. I didn't expect them to. But this time I wasn't waiting. I had already chosen my real family. The ones who stood by me when things got ugly. The ones who didn't ask me to smile through pain just to make others comfortable. The morning of my wedding arrived quietly. No chaos, no shouting across rooms, no last-minute crises. Just the gentle hum of music, the smell of fresh flowers, and the sound of Emily's laughter echoing down the hallway as she made sure the caterer wasn't late. I stood in front of the mirror in my dressing room, staring at myself in a gown I once thought I'd wear in front of my parents, my father giving me away, my mother adjusting my veil. But that wasn't how this story turned out, and honestly, I was okay with that. Emily peeked in holding a steaming cup of tea and a nervous smile. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Almost," I whispered, turning from the mirror. She stepped closer, smoothed the lace on my sleeve, then met my eyes in the reflection. "You look beautiful," she said. "And you're not alone." Her voice trembled slightly at the end of that sentence, and that's when I felt it, a warmth I hadn't known I needed. She wasn't just my maid of honor. She was my real sister in every way Sarah never could be. There were no big speeches about missing family that morning, no quiet sobs over what could have been. The truth was, no one brought them up at all, because they weren't missed. Everyone who mattered was already there. The ceremony took place outside under a canopy of trees, strung with lights, the sun filtering through the leaves like it was blessing us. Chairs were filled with friends who had become family. Smiles were easy. Tears came freely, but not from sadness. As the music started, my heart beat faster. I took a deep breath. That's when Emily held out her hand. "Ready to walk down that aisle?" she asked, her eyes shining. I hesitated just for a moment. Growing up, I always thought it would be Dad by my side. But now, as Emily wrapped her arm through mine and gave me the kind of steadying look only someone who truly knew my pain could give, I realized something that nearly brought me to tears. This felt right. As we walked slowly down the aisle, everyone rose. But what I noticed most wasn't the camera flashes, or the flowers, or even Alex at the altar. What I noticed was the peace. For the first time in years, there was no tension. No waiting for a shoe to drop. No anxiety about who might say what. No pressure to smile through pain. Just love. Real, simple, unconditional love. Alex looked at me the way no one ever had before, like I was the safest place he'd ever known. And I realized I didn't need to be given away by anyone, because I hadn't been passed down like a tradition. I had chosen this life. The vows were emotional. Alex promised to never make me feel second to anyone again. I promised to stop shrinking myself just to keep peace. We both cried, and so did half the crowd. There was no mention of family that day. But when Emily toasted us at the reception, she said, "One line I'll never forget. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who stands by you when your world falls apart." Everyone clapped. Some cried. I just held her hand under the table and whispered, "Thank you." She squeezed back. "Always." Later that evening, as we danced our first dance under the stars, I looked around at the people surrounding us. People who had chosen to love us, support us, believe in our happiness. Not a single person asked, "Where's your mom and dad?" No one whispered about Sarah, because no one cared. Not in the bitter way, but in the healing way. They knew this day wasn't about who wasn't there. It was about who stayed. As the night wound down, the laughter never faded. The music played soft now, and people sipped coffee, watched the candles flicker, and smiled. I stood off to the side for a moment, watching Alex laugh with one of his uncles and Emily wrangling the flower girls. That's when it hit me. I felt light. For so long, I carried the weight of broken family ties, of expectations I could never meet, of betrayal and shame. And now, I felt nothing but joy. No, my parents weren't there. Neither was Sarah. But I didn't need them to feel whole. In fact, I felt whole because I'd chosen not to let them in. Not out of hate, but out of self-respect. And as the stars blinked into view and the last song of the night played, I whispered something only the wind could hear. For the first time, I feel free, without them. And it was true. Life has a strange way of balancing itself out. You don't always see it right away, Sometimes it takes months, years even. But eventually, what's broken finds a way to fall apart entirely. That's exactly what happened with Sarah and Ryan. A few months after my wedding, their relationship went public. Not through an announcement or a cheerful social media post, but through whispers, side eyes, and awkward family gatherings from those who still entertained the idea of inviting them. People didn't celebrate them. They didn't get the love wins kind of attention they might have been expecting. Instead, what they got was silence. Cold. Loud. Damning silence. Extended family ignored their pictures. Friends unfollowed. Former colleagues stopped reaching out. Because deep down, everyone knew how their relationship had started. Ryan lost his job about 3 months after they went public. He was working in a respectable firm where image mattered. At first, his personal life had been just that personal. But whispers started floating after one of his coworkers found out he'd left his fiancée for her younger sister. Human resources got involved not because it was a crime, but because it wasn't professional. Soon after he was let go quietly, the firm citing a need to restructure the department. But we all knew what that meant. Last I heard, he'd taken a job 2 pay grades lower and was working night shifts for the first time in years. Sarah, for her part, didn't last long in that forbidden love fantasy either. At first, she defended him to everyone, told our extended family that they were meant to be, and found love in the wrong place but the right time. No one bought it, not even her. 6 months in, she posted a vague, sad quote on Instagram about heartbreak. Another 2 weeks later, she deleted every photo of him. And then the truth came out trickling through mutual friends like wine spilled on white carpet, sticky, messy, and impossible to clean up. He only ever talked about her, you know. Sarah had reportedly said, referring to me. I thought I could be what she wasn't. But he just used me to stay close to her memory. It would have been satisfying if it weren't so pathetic. They'd destroyed my world, shattered trust, ruined relationships, severed family ties, all for what? A failed relationship that never had a chance. They weren't soulmates. They were just 2 selfish people who mistook thrill for love. And while I was enjoying weekends with Alex, hosting dinner parties with Emily, building a quiet, beautiful life, I heard from my cousin one day that my mother had been hospitalized. It wasn't physical. It was depression. According to Dad's letter, yes, a letter, not a call, she had stopped eating well, barely left her room, and refused to talk to anyone except Sarah, who was too caught up in her own drama to help. Apparently, losing both her daughters, one to scandal, one to silence, had broken her spirit. Dad's letter was handwritten shaky. It started with, I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you the truth. He talked about how he and Mom had thought they were protecting family by trying to keep us all together, how they never imagined Sarah would take things that far, and how they just wanted peace. But we chose the wrong daughter to defend, he wrote. And by the time we realized it, we'd already lost you. It should have made me cry. But all I felt was stillness. He ended the letter asking if I'd consider visiting my mom in the hospital. Not for them, but for her. And for a brief moment I almost did. But then I remembered sitting alone on my wedding day, staring at the back of an empty church pew where my father should have stood. I remembered the birthday party Sarah ruined, the family dinners where I was invisible, the ultimatums disguised as peacekeeping. And I realized they hadn't lost me now. They'd lost me long before. Some betrayals take years to sink in. Some healing takes even longer to begin. But here's the truth. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or post about them or beg for apologies. I just needed to live well without them. And that's exactly what I was doing. Some people think revenge means fire and fury, doors slammed, voices raised, and bridges burned. But the older I get, the more I realize there is no greater revenge than living a life they can't touch. No more explaining, no more defending, no more begging anyone to understand why I walked away. Just peace. Months passed. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Alex and I started a little garden behind our house, something I never imagined I'd care about, but now love deeply. Watching things grow under your care. It changes you. Gently. I left marketing behind and started writing again. Not fiction, but reflections, essays, letters, pieces of me that I never shared before. Emily was the first to suggest I publish them. I laughed at the idea. Who'd read that, I asked. People who've been hurt, she said. People who need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves. She was right. I self-published a short book, just 120 pages. Quiet isn't weak healing when you've been betrayed. To my surprise, it resonated. Emails came pouring in from women, widowers, divorcees, people who had chosen themselves after years of being guilted into silence. They said my story helped them speak up, helped them walk away, helped them realize they weren't wrong for hurting. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not for being a good daughter or a quiet sister, but for being me. Eventually, I started speaking at local events, not often, just once or twice a month. I partnered with a small nonprofit that supported women rebuilding their lives after emotional trauma. We ran workshops, journaling nights, even a small scholarship fund for women going back to school later in life. None of it was glamorous, but every time someone came up after a talk and whispered thank you, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the steady, grounding kind. The kind that comes from surviving without turning bitter. I never saw Sarah again. Last I heard, she moved to another state. Some say she's doing better. Others say she isn't. I don't know. I don't need to. Ryan disappeared from my world completely. My parents. Still silent. I never responded to Dad's letter. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. But forgiveness isn't a door I'm keeping locked. It's just one I'm not ready to open. And that's okay. Because I am no longer the girl who needed everyone to love her to feel whole. I am not the woman begging for a seat at the family table. I built a new table with people who bring peace, not pressure. Who show up, not just speak up. On the anniversary of my wedding, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and opened my old journal. The one I hadn't touched since that night I ran to Emily's with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. And I wrote these words. To anyone who has ever laid their peace down at someone else's feet, stop. Pick it back up. Hold it close. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it does. You are not dramatic for walking away from those who hurt you. You are not cold for protecting your boundaries. You are not wrong for saying enough. You are allowed to choose peace even if it means choosing it alone. You are allowed to heal, to move on, to live without guilt. You are allowed to be happy even if they never say sorry. You don't have to be their sister, daughter, or friend if being that means betraying yourself. You owe no one your forgiveness, but you owe yourself your freedom. That entry became the last page of my second book. It wasn't a revenge story. It was a rebirth. If you've made it this far, thank you. If this story moved you in any way, if it made you feel seen, heard, or less alone, I invite you to do one thing. Leave a comment. Tell us your story, your hurt, your healing. You never know who might read it and find strength in your words. Subscribe for more real stories, more truth, more moments where the quiet ones get to be heard. Because here, your voice matters. Let this be a reminder. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is never needing one.